It's October 2009 and some hunters are on the top of Mount Panola, 30 miles from Oklahoma. It's around 3 p.m. in the afternoon and they discover an abandoned truck. Within it is a dog that looks incredibly unwell. He's obviously been left there for days with no food or water. They call the police, and when the sheriffs arrive, they break into this truck. What they discover is unsettling. This is True Crime with Emma, and I'm going to tell you the case of the Jamison family. Within the truck, they found wallets, purses, mobile phones, and $32,000 in cash. They identify the truck as belonging to the Jamison family. They begin immediately searching the woods on top of this mountain, thinking maybe they'd just gotten lost, but couldn't find anything. At the same time, they begin questioning locals in town, and no one had seen or heard from them in 8 days. Police begin to wonder, how can an entire family go missing for over a week and no one report them missing? What's happened? How did they end up on the top of a mountain? And why did they leave loads of cash and their phones, coats, bags in the car, including their family dog, and then just leave? The Jamison family are made up of Bobby Jamison, who's 44, Sherry Lynn Jamison, who's 40, and their daughter Madison, who's 6 years old. They were last seen by a man who sort of lives in a shack in a very remote area. He was living completely off-grid at the time. The Jamison family were in their truck. They saw him by the side of the road. They were very lost and couldn't find a particular property they were looking for. They asked this man for directions, which he gave, and that was the last time anyone has ever seen Bobby, Sherry Lynn, or Madison. After doing some research, the police discover that the Jamison family were intending on buying this kind of 40-acre plot, this very remote location around 30 miles out of the town they were living in Eufaula, Oklahoma. So the Jamison family really wanted to just live off-grid. They wanted to be self-sufficient, independent. They wanted that freedom from life, and they wanted to go and live up sort of the mountain next to a small community that was already living off-grid. There was a property up there for sale that was like 40 acres. They were a very quiet and reserved family and would often go days or even months without speaking to any other friends or any other relatives. So the police have discovered their truck with all their phones and money and coats in. They also have spoken to this man who said, look, I spoke to the Jamison family. They were lost. They were trying to find this property. And that's the last time anyone has ever seen them. The police are really worried because it gets very cold on those mountains at night. And with no coats, you could easily pass away from hypothermia. So they begin looking at the phones. And on these phones, mobile phones, they obviously have GPS. And they can see that the Madisons had driven up to the top of the mountain where they'd parked their truck. They'd gone for a walk up this kind of trail, gotten to the top, taken a picture of Madison at the top of this trail, come back down the trail and put their phones and everything in the car, and then gone again. In this picture that they took of Madison, all seems well. They seem very happy, and using the GPS, they can tell that they spent around 20 minutes at the top of this hill before coming back down. But why did they then leave all of their stuff in the car, including their dog, and then just leave, like vanish? Why did they not take their stuff with them? They begin looking around the truck to see whether there was a struggle, a fight. Maybe they were confronted by some other individuals who tried to rob them or cause some harm, but there was no broken glass. There was no indication of a struggle or a fight had ever happened. Also, there was a large amount of money left in the car, so if it was a robbery, they would have at least taken the money and also probably the truck. So it looked like no one else was involved. The police go to the Jamison family home in Oklahoma and begin to search there. They find many kind of disturbing or slightly odd things. They find an 11-page letter written by Sherry Lynn talking about how she hates her husband Bobby and that she wants a divorce. The friends also confirm that this was not a happy marriage, and it all began to go downhill in 2003 when Bobby was in a car accident. He was seriously injured and it left him unable to work due to chronic pain. He became depressed and that put a serious strain on their marriage. Friends also confirmed that Sherry Lynn did own a gun, and the police are concerned because they cannot find this gun anywhere, not at the home, not in the truck, and this truck had like bags and bags of stuff. I think the Jamisons were planning on just moving up there, hauling everything up there and just staying there. So they went through all of these bags of stuff. They went through the entire Jamison family home and could not find Sherry Lee's gun. Friends also state that Sherry Lee believes that she herself is a witch. She believes in kind of angels and spirits and demons, and that it wasn't just Sherry Lynn who believed these things. Bobby also believed these things as well. And Madison, even the 6-year-old little girl, would often speak to angels. She would frequently have imaginary friends who were spirits. Bobby and Sherry Lynn also believed in evil spirits. They even asked the local preacher if they could purchase a special bullet that would kill these evil spirits and demons that resided there. Local neighbours also confirmed that yes, Sherry Lynn did believe she was a witch, and she would spray paint odd sort of things around the town, saying witches don't like their cats being murdered. So Sherry Lynn's cat had recently died, and she was kind of spray painting these messages around town, warning people that she knew that someone had killed her cat. This family had slightly different beliefs. Their behaviour was slightly bizarre leading up to their disappearance. And the concerning behaviour specifically kind of centred around Sherry Lynn. Sherry Lynn also didn't work. She suffered from bipolar, so they were both on medical kind of benefits. And people did say that if Sherry Lynn did not take her medication, her behaviour became more outlandish, more bizarre. So the police begin to think, was this a murder-suicide? However, they had helicopters, firefighters. This was a big search for those woods, and they didn't find anything. If this was a murder-suicide, I mean, Sherry Lynn could cover up the bodies of her husband and child, but she wouldn't be able to cover up herself. So she would be out in the open with her gun, and they can't find anything. They can't find anything in this woods. They've done an extensive search. The Jamison family also have lots of surveillance cameras around their home. The police review these surveillance cameras and can see the day that they were packing up to leave to go up this mountain. And it seems as though Bobby and Sherry Lynn are just like in a trance-like state. They're passing each other, very as though they're not even acknowledging each other exist. It's a very odd thing to watch as they pack up their truck. This led police to believe perhaps drugs were involved and Bobby and Sherry Lynn were high on meth. Meth is quite prevalent in Oklahoma, and they do have a continued issue with it. Also, where Bobby and Sherry Lynn were on disability checks, how did they end up with $32,000 in cash? This led maybe some people to suspect that they were also drug dealers. They maybe took meth and dealt it to make money. When they're going through this surveillance footage and they're looking at them kind of packing up the car, they see one of the belongings is a brown briefcase. This was never discovered, has never been discovered. It was not in the truck. It was not anywhere in the home. What did this brown briefcase contain? Is it important in discovering what happened to the Jamison family? So investigators rule out murder-suicide. They also rule out Sherry Lynn as being the cause of anything, and they also rule out drugs. So what happened? We have a family that, in a trance-like state, have loaded up the car. They want to live away from anyone. They have $32,000 in cash. Where have they got that from when neither of them are working? They've left their car with their phones, their money, and their dog on the top of a mountain, and they've completely disappeared. And despite extensive searches in the wooded area, they cannot find them. They've completely vanished. The police begin looking at a local handyman. So 3 weeks earlier, before the Jamison family disappeared, Bobby hired this handyman to do odd jobs around the home. Bobby physically couldn't do them himself. He couldn't upkeep the physical work of the house, so he hired this guy. Sherry Lynn, however, did not like this man at all. He made her feel incredibly uncomfortable. He was a white supremacist, and he went up to Sherry Lynn and said that she should be murdered for having Indian blood. Sherry Lynn feels incredibly uncomfortable, threatened and unsafe in her own home. So she takes her gun and threatens him and tells him to leave and never come back. So they begin looking into this handyman and they track him down. He has a solid alibi for the entire time. He was nowhere near the Jamison family when they went missing, so he is also ruled out. This is now a very confusing case, and the police are making no headway with it. They cannot figure it out. 4 years later, some hunters are in that same mountain and they've come across the skeletal remains of 3 bodies, 2 adults and a child. And these skeletal remains are just 3 miles from where the Jamison family truck was abandoned. So not that far away at all. The bones were confirmed to be the Jamison family, Bobby, Sherry Lynn and little Madison. And although it brought some conclusions to the case, it also brought a lot of questions. Why were they not discovered in the original search? They were only 3 miles from the truck. Why could they not make it back to the truck if they were only that short of a distance? That's less than kind of like a 40-minute walk. Were they still alive when the police were searching, but they maybe just got disorientated and lost? Or did someone place their bones there? What caused them to leave the truck and go on a walk without their phones and their coats? Where were they going? What were they doing? Sherry Lynn's gun was never found, and this obviously wasn't a murder-suicide because the gun wasn't found anywhere near the bodies either. Where is Sherry Lynn's gun? Also, what was in that brown briefcase that was never found? So some theories to answer this case are that the couple were on drugs and that they were very disorientated. They left their phones and the coats and everything in the car without thinking because they were just high. They went on the walk, got completely disorientated, didn't know where they were, couldn't make their way back, and therefore eventually died of exposure and probably hypothermia. It was very cold at the time, and it was just a very unfortunate tragedy that surrounded drug use. Another theory is that someone followed them up the mountain, and this someone was most likely Bobby's father. Bobby and Bobby's father do not get on. Bobby's father actually threatened to kill him in the past. He had hit Bobby with his own car. He also didn't like the fact that Sherry Lynn believed she was a witch and had all these kind of views. He thought she was part of a cult. So he really didn't like his son, really didn't like his son or his son's wife. And so the theory is that Bobby's father went up, followed them up the mountain, took Sherry Lynn's gun and murdered the entire family. It is an unsolved case in terms of what really happened. How did they die? They couldn't do any forensics on the bones because they were so kind of weathered and left out, and it had been so long. They can't tell whether it was a murder or an accident. That was the very mysterious case of the Jamison family. If you have any other theories, please let me know in the comments below. I do also have a podcast on Spotify, True Crime with Emma, if you prefer to listen that way. If you have any cases, please let me know. And as always, I will see you next time.